Hello again and welcome back to our course on PSE 15. In this section and the next one we're going to look at lighting and levels. I mentioned these a few times earlier on in the course, particularly when we were looking at quick mode, and I should point out that when it comes to lighting and levels there are quite a few tools in PSE 15 that you can use to address problems with them. And of course we can also adjust lighting and levels to enhance images and create effects and so on. If you go into guided mode, in the basic section some of the most commonly used guided edits are the brightness and contrast one here, the levels guided edit, and the lighten and darken guided edit. And I do suggest that you spend a little bit of time trying each of those out, particularly in relation to a couple of the problems we're looking at in this section. In expert mode, on the enhance menu, we have commands like auto levels and auto contrast, adjust lighting. And again, I suggest you spend a little bit of time trying each of those out, and particularly trying them out with perhaps one or more of your images that you have problems with. In this section I'm going to concentrate on dealing with a lighting problem in expert mode, and I'm really going to look at some quite detailed and powerful tools to address these problems. So it is important that you spend a little bit of time yourself looking at some of those more straightforward tools, for example the ones in guided edit. So the picture I'm looking at here has really quite an extreme problem, because although the sky and the buildings are pretty good, I quite like the light and colour on those, there is a whole area shrouded in shadow. And whatever method we're going to use to improve the lighting in this image is going to need to be able to be focused on particular areas and particular problems. If I go back up to the enhance menu, one of the options there was adjust lighting, and from there are three options: shadows and highlights, brightness and contrast, levels. Any one of those, in fact probably all three of those, I could use to try to solve this problem. But the one that I'm going to apply first, and the one that I'm going to concentrate on in this section, is levels. If I select levels, it brings up this dialog with these histograms on it, and I'm going to explain to you how these histograms work, because ultimately they are the tools that enable you to make the most detailed and targeted changes to the levels of light in an image. But I'm not actually going to do it like this. What I'm going to do is to do this as an adjustment layer. So I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to go up to the top of the layers panel, and I'm going to click on levels, and I've now added a levels layer. The big advantage of course of doing it this way is that I can experiment with it, I can try it out. If I don't like it, or if I want to try something else, I can switch this layer off, at least temporarily, and maybe try one of the other options. But generally speaking, when it comes to doing adjustments to images, wherever possible, I do them via layers. Now the first thing to point out is that one of the controls here, the channel control, lets me work on RGB or on individual red, green and blue channels. Individual red, green and blue channels is a little bit beyond what I was intending to do here, so we'll just stick with RGB. And let's take a look at this histogram. The histogram shows the distribution of light levels in the image, and the distribution is according to the number of pixels. You see that very tall sort of mountain at the left there? That's the dark end, so there are many dark pixels. Not many of them are actually black, which is the 0 mark there, but there are many very dark ones, of course corresponding to this shaded area here. At the other extreme, on the right, we have quite a lot of white pixels, but we've got very many light pixels. Not as many as the dark ones. The very lightest pixels will be the ones on the walls of the buildings, some of the pixels in the sky, the clouds in the sky, and so on. And then in the middle, we have the middle levels of light. So this will be things like the roofs of the building, the tree there, some of the jackets, some parts of the horses, and so on. So that histogram gives us a good idea of how the light levels are distributed in this image. Although the problem with this image is distinctly the number of very dark areas, the parts in shadow, you can use this levels adjustment for all sorts of lighting problems, including overexposed images, for example. There are a number of ways of using this levels adjustment. Let's start with these three markers here. The right one, the white one, is called the white point. And if I move the white point to the left, what's going to happen is this. Wherever I leave it, let's suppose that I move it to there. What PSE does is this. It says that now marks white, and any pixel that is to the right of that point is now going to be a white pixel. So let me just put it back again. So basically an awful lot of the pixels that were towards the right hand end but not actually white, once I move that white point over, become white. And you can see the effect of that in the image. How many more pixels become white? One of the impacts of that, of course, is that the cloud starts to look a bit more continuous in its whiteness because the very light pixels are now white. Let me put that back. At the other end, if I move the black point to the right, what I'm saying is that everything to the left of this is now black. If I say moved it to there, I've made the situation worse because even more of the pixels are now marked as black pixels, so that's not going to help. The middle one is the grey point, and by moving the grey point, I'm moving the mid lighting level. If I move it towards the left, more of the pixels will be to the right of that grey point, and what they're going to do is become lighter. So if I move those over to there, say, look at the effect on the picture. Some of the pixels, which were originally to the left of the grey point, are now to the right of it, and therefore they are going to be significantly lighter than they were before. Now, I'm not saying that what I've achieved there is a wonderful solution, but it certainly seems well on the way to making the image a lot better in terms of the balance of the light. And it's certainly gone a long way to compensate for many parts of the image being in deep shadow. Let me put those back to the way they were using the reset button. And let me show you how to use these little eyedroppers here. There are three of them. There's a black point sample eyedropper, a grey point sample eyedropper, and a white point sample eyedropper. Instead of using those sliders, what I can do is, for example, select the white point eyedropper, and then if I click somewhere on the image, that will denote the white point. If I click on a wall of the building, for example, that will define white. Anything lighter than that will be white. That won't have a very great effect. However, if I clicked on a roof, the sort of brown tiled roof, and said this is now white, look what happens. I finish up with a really overexposed image there, although of course I may quite like that effect. So you have an alternative approach of using the eyedroppers. The other control in this levels adjustment layer is the output levels control. And using this control you can reduce the tonal range in the image. If I were to say start at the dark end, by moving that left hand marker there to the right, I'm eliminating the darkest pixels in the image, or should I say the ability of pixels in the image to be any darker than that. From the other end, of course, I have the opposite effect of eliminating the lighter end. So I'm effectively reducing the contrast in the image. Sometimes that helps, but of course you need to do it in conjunction with the other settings. Once again, let me reset everything. So let me choose the setting that seemed to work for me. It's not quite right, but it's certainly a lot better than it was. And of course, one of the big advantages of using this adjustment layer, let me just close it there, is that at any time I can switch it off by just changing its visibility to no. And I suggest you try now one of the other adjustments. Try a brightness and contrast adjustment, see what you can achieve. The other thing to bear in mind, of course, is that these layers can have layer masks. So if I was approaching this particular problem and decided that there was just one area of the image that I wanted to make an adjustment to, I could use a mask to prevent the adjustment affecting other parts of the image. Again, that's one for you to try. However, there's another way of targeting lighting changes to particular parts of an image, and that's to use the dodge and burn tools. And that's what we're going to look at in the next section. I'll see you then.